Hi and welcome to another story. If you're enjoying Dob Entertainment and want even more, then check out my Patreon channel, patreon.com/James Dobinson. Link in the description. There you'll find full audiobooks for Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, Lord of the Rings, Roald Dahl, David Walliams and many more being added all the time. Thanks for your support as always. Let's get into the story. Hi and welcome to another story, and today we have part 5 of Animalcolm by David Baddiel, continuing from chapter 35, Dominant Male. See no, speak no, hear no, it's fine, said Louis, I'm fine. The three chimps stopped jumping, chattering and screeching immediately. Instead they lowered their heads, bowed towards Louis and backed off, saying, Thank heavens for that, your eminence. Truly thankful, your chimpinance. Could not be more relieved, your hairiness. Now, said Louis, turning to Malcolm, his voice more booming and low than ever, Who are you? And why have you disturbed my mid-morning sleep? Well, Louis, said Malcolm. Lord King Louis, interjected See No. Or your chimpinance, said Speak No. And if you continue to speak to the Lord King, it's ch-amp, as in champion chimp, not ch-ump, as in... At this point, Hear No looked a bit uncertain. Chump? Right, well, Lord King Louis, sir. You don't have to say sir, said Louis, magnanimously. Right, well, thing is, Suddenly Malcolm felt very tired of having to explain how he was really a boy again. Also, for some reason, he couldn't quite explain. He was not particularly keen on Louis, so instead he said, Actually, why do I have to call you Lord King Louis, and why is everyone bowing and scraping to you? Lord Louis frowned. Chimps can really do this, and very large lines appeared across his forehead. His nostrils flared, becoming even wider holes than they already were. Speak No, Hear No, and See No looked incredibly shocked. In fact, Speak No put both his hands over his mouth. Hear No put his over his ears, and See No put his over his eyes. Because I, said Louis, even more loudly and boomingly, am the dominant male in this community. The dominant male, echoed Speak No, Hear No, and See No together, still holding their hands over their mouth, ears, and eyes. So it was quite hard to hear Speak No, and quite surprising that Hear No heard it in the first place. Then they actually sang it, like an amen in church. The dominant male. Would you like to dispute my dominance, Malcolm? Said Louis, rising up to his full height. Would you like to challenge it? Louis then did something which, if Malcolm hadn't been so frightened, he might have found funny, as it was so monkey-ish. He, Louis, raised both his long furry arms above his head and brought his fist down on his chest, beating it repeatedly and screaming while he did it, like a big monkey, like King Kong. Suddenly all the chimps in the enclosure were surrounding Louis and Malcolm, going, Fight, 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 fight. Louis was still beating his chest. Malcolm, although he didn't really want to fight, thought, oh well, when in Rome, or rather, when in the monkey dome. So he raised himself up to his full height and started beating his chest and screaming too. Kind of felt good. Kind of felt right. It kind of made Malcolm feel he was up for the fight. Hey, he thought, maybe if I win this fight, I'll be the dominant male, and all the others will have to call me your chimpiness. That'll be great. They approached each other, fists a-beating, with all the other chimps still going, Fight, fight, fight. Louis raised one of his fists above his head. Malcolm, suddenly realising that taking on the much bigger Louis may have been a mistake, cowered. But then, just before Louis brought that fist down on Malcolm, Hear No cried out, Your smelliness! What is it? Said Louis. A human boy, approaching the cage. Louis and all the other chimps stopped what they were doing, immediately, turning to look. Louis nodded and took a deep breath. We will deal with this, he said, looking heavily at Malcolm. Later. Meanwhile, prepare yourselves for the ritual. The chimps all scurried away, as if taking positions. Malcolm, confused, turned to look at the bars of the cage. There, standing on the other side of them, smiling, pointing and clapping, was his little brother Bert. Chapter 36. Oh dear. I love the zoo so much, said Jackie, as they approached the monkey house. Yes, said Stuart, so do I. Yeah, the zoo is like... Zoo, said Libby. What does that one mean? Said Grandpa. Zillion OMGs, obs. Grandpa nodded. I sometimes wonder if you are just making these up on the spot. Look at Bert, said Jackie. He's run up ahead. He's loving the chimps, said Stuart. Can I eat them? Shouted Bert. Can I eat them? Should we let him go so close to the bars? Said Jackie. We know we haven't let any of the children do that since... She faltered a little, lowering her voice. The monkey moment. "Oh, I think it'll be fine. Just keep an eye out," said Stuart. "Talking of Malcolm," he continued, taking Jackie's hand as they walked, "I feel sure from the phone calls that he's having such a good time on the farm that when he comes back, we can bring him here again. I think he'll be over the monkey moment and find his love for animals once more." "Ah," said Jackie sadly, "I hope you're right." By this point, they were standing in front of the chimp enclosure. Jackie turned towards it and said, "I just wish he was here now." Malcolm looked at Bert, and behind him his mum, Dad, Grandpa and sister. He ran over to the bars of the cage. "Mum, Dad, Bert, Grandpa, Libby," he shouted, pointing to himself. "It's me, Malcolm." "Oh, look, Bert, look at that one," said Grandpa. "He's jumping up and down and pointing at himself. What do you think he's saying with all that screaming?" "I think he's saying, 'Eat me. You can eat me if you want.'" "No, I don't think so, Bert." "Is he saying this?" said Bert. He'd managed to pick Stuart's pocket. In his hand he held up Stuart's phone, with the Animal SFX app on screen. He pressed the chimp icon, and it made a chattering noise, and the family all laughed. "Oh, for heaven's sake," shouted Malcolm. "No, that icon is not even speaking proper monkey. Bert, Libby, it's me, Malcolm." "Wow," said Libby, sounding ever so slightly unbored for a moment. "That monkey is like so GOI. "GOI?" said Grandpa. "Going on Instagram," said Libby, turning around to face away from the cage, pouting, brushing her hair, and producing her phone at the same time in one expert move. "No," said Malcolm, "you don't understand." Click went Libby's phone. She turned around again, clicking on it. "Selfie with monkey. LOLT 3000. Smiley face, laughing face, crying face. Smiling, laughing, crying, monkey face." "I don't want to be on Instagram," shouted Malcolm, "and I'm not a monkey." "That's right," shouted Tarzan from somewhere behind him. "Chimps aren't monkeys, you tell 'em." "Yes, that's right, but I didn't mean that. I meant, Mum, Dad, I'm Malcolm." "Ha ha, what a funny monkey," said his mum and dad. "Chimp," corrected Malcolm. "And boy." "Look at his silly jumping up and down and pointing at himself. So funny." Malcolm looked at them. He stopped jumping up and down and pointed at himself. He took a deep breath and let out a deep sigh. He felt very sad. He had been so sure that when his family had been found, they would be able, somehow, to see it was him. That whatever animal he happened to be at the time, they would see through the outer skin and realise, "Oh my God, that's Malcolm." Instead, they were laughing and pointing and saying what a funny monkey he was. He turned around, away from his family. I suppose, he thought, I should just rejoin the other chimps and get used to being one of them for the rest of my life. When he turned around, however, he didn't quite have time to just indulge himself in self-pity about this, because he noticed something about all the chimps, which was that they all raised their arms, and they were all holding something. A trickle formed in Malcolm's memory, a trickle which became a flood when he looked over at Lord King Louis and remembered why he might not have felt very happy to have made his acquaintance. Because Lord King Louis was scooping his hand into the pile of holy plop-plop at his feet, and then raising that hand above his head. "Remember," shouted Hierno to all the other chimps, "the first throw always goes to Lord King Louis." There were some grumbling noises at this point. "Stop grumbling," shouted Sino. "That's how it always goes." In that second, it all came back to Malcolm, all the terror and humiliation of the monkey moment. And what made it worse was, as he looked at the angle of Louis's arm, he realised that this time the chimp was not aiming at him, but at Bert. "Bert," shouted Malcolm, "run! Take cover!" "Oh, good," said Stuart. "That one's perked up again. I thought he'd gone a bit quiet." "Can I eat him?" said Bert, opening his mouth. Opening his mouth. Oh dear. Chapter 37. Splat. "Right," said Louis. "Here we go." A round ball of dominant male poo left his hand, travelling very quickly in the direction of Bert. Realising it was too late to do anything else, and that Bert and the rest of his family were frankly too stupid, despite their previous experience, to understand what was happening, Malcolm came to a swift and unhappy conclusion. Then he jumped in front of Bert, making himself a human shield. A monkey shield. An ape shield. Splat went the ball of poo all over Malcolm's face. A huge gasp went up from the chimps. "What are you doing?" shouted Louis furiously. "Protecting my little brother," shouted Malcolm back, although he didn't shout it that loud, as, just at that minute, he didn't want to open his mouth too wide. "What is he talking about?" said Louis. "We've no idea, your PG tipsness," said Speakno. "Never mind, on with the ritual," shouted Louis, picking up more poo from the pile and throwing it at Bert, except Malcolm was still standing in front of him. Splat again. "I'm warning you, Malcolm," shouted Louis. No, shouted Malcolm. Have you seen what all the other chimps are holding? I haven't seen, no, said Malcolm, as I'm shutting my eyes very tightly, but I can guess. You have one last chance. Step aside. As if in answer, Malcolm put his hands behind him and laced his long arms between the bars to make it clear he wasn't going anywhere. Fine. Louis nodded to Hear No, Speak No and See No, who all turned to the massed ranks of the chimps and screamed in unison, Launch poos! Every chimp in there raised their arms and started chucking stinky missiles at Bert. The poos flew in not very beautiful arcs towards where he was standing. Malcolm heard his mum say, Oh my goodness, not again, Bert, come away. Yes, Bert, said his father, step away from the cage. G-O-O-T-W, Bert, said Libby, sounding a little unbored at the moment, like G-O-O-T-W, get out of the way. But Bert didn't, because none of the poo had actually hit him yet. He just found it really funny. Malcolm could hear him laughing, and on the edges of his vision, he could also see him ducking around to try to get a better view of the funny monkeys trying, as far as Bert was concerned, to throw poo at the one monkey standing in front of him. So that meant that Malcolm became a goalie. He had to dive in front of, block with his body, get his head in the way of about 30 balls of poo. Bert moves to the right. Malcolm dives to the right, splat on his arm. Bert moves to the left. Malcolm dives to the left, splat on his shoulder. Bert tries to jump higher than Malcolm, who, as a chimp, is not taller than him, to see better. Malcolm leaps up and catches another one, splat, full in the face. Bert crouches down to see through Malcolm's legs. Malcolm kneels down and takes one for the team. Well, for Bert anyway, right in his softest chimp bits. Splat. By the end of it, Malcolm was completely covered. It was much, much worse than the original monkey moment, when at least he'd had the bars of the cage in the way. But still, Bert was poo-free, and now, surely, his family would realise who this chimp really was, who had saved their youngest son from having his own monkey moment. Malcolm turned round to face them, opening his eyes and his arms wide. He knew he was encrusted in smelliness from head to foot, and that he therefore might not present the loveliest image to his family, but he was convinced that his enormous act of self-sacrifice would mean that they would see through the poo and the chimp body and recognise him. What he saw instead were the backs of his family as they walked away. Goodness me, Stuart was saying. That was a bit weird. Yeah, Libby replied. Gross. Does that mean get rid of smelly? Said Grandpa. No, interrupted Libby. It just means gross. Which that was. So do the chimps do that to every little boy that comes right up to the cage? Jackie said. Maybe, replied Stuart. Thank goodness for the blocking chimp, though. Yes, I wonder why he was doing that. Oh, just for a bit of chimpy fun, I imagine. They probably love getting covered in poo. Can I eat him? Certainly not at the moment, Bert, no. Malcolm watched them go. He felt very, very sad, and would have started crying, even had he not been hit on the back of the head at that point by one last poo missile from one last chimp, which, having had quite a lot of time to harden, knocked him out. Chapter 38. A day over 148. When Malcolm woke up, the first things he saw, looking up at him from the grass opposite the chimp enclosure, were Benny and Bjornita. Oh no, he thought, not a tortoise again, please. Well, thank you very much, I'm sure, said Bjornita. Did I say that out loud? Groaned Malcolm. You did, said Benny. Interestingly, you said it in tortoise, otherwise we wouldn't have understood you. Yeah, well, that's because I am a tortoise again, said Malcolm, reaching out a leg to try to rub his aching head. Aren't I? He said, aren't I? Partly because he realised that what Benny said didn't quite make sense. If he was a tortoise, then why was it interesting that he was speaking tortoise? And partly because the leg he was reaching out to rub his head with appeared to be covered in feathers. No, said Benny, you're a pigeon. And frankly, your tortoise accent is terrible, said Bjornita. Malcolm stood up, or rather perched up. He looked around. He looked around some more, at a slightly different angle. He looked around the other way. He looked at the sky. The sun was either going up or going down. There was no way to tell. What happened to my family? He said, in his pigeon tortoise. What family? Said Benny. Humans, a mum and dad, a teenage girl, a grandpa and a little boy. Would the teenage girl be taking selfies with every animal? Said Bjornita. Yes. And would the little boy be asking if he could eat every animal? Said Benny. Yes. We just passed them on the way out. Right, thanks, said Malcolm, hopping through the bars and joining them on the grass. He spread his wings. It felt good. He could feel the wind underneath them, ready to lift him. And then, wait a minute, he said. What am I doing? Going after your family, said Benny. No, but... He put his wings down. They were just here, while I was a chimp, and they didn't recognise me. How would they recognise me as a pigeon? That's true, said Benny. After all, pigeons do look much less like humans than chimps. Oh, that's very helpful, said Bjornita. Sorry, but they do. And what time is it? Said Malcolm, looking up into the sky. We don't have much of a sense of time, said Benny. It passes a bit slower for us than most. Oh, forget it, said Malcolm. He looked up at the sun. It was about halfway between directly up and the horizon. It couldn't be mid-morning, so it must be mid-afternoon. Oh, no. OK, said Malcolm, sounding calmer than he felt. So in a few hours, it'll be dark, and by tomorrow morning, it will have been 3 days since K-Pax transformed me into an animal. A tortoise, said Benny, in an upbeat way, but then realised, looking at Malcolm's sad face, that it probably wasn't the moment for upbeatness. Yes, said Malcolm quietly, so I may as well sit it out here and just accept that I'm never going to get back to being a boy. He folded his wings round himself, covering his eyes, and sank down onto the grass. Benny and Bjornita exchanged glances. Eventually Bjornita said, Malcolm, listen. I remember when I was a tiny tortoise and first saw my reflection in a pool of water. I thought, I'm so ugly. Bjornita! Shh, Benny, let me carry on. I did. I know it's hard to believe. Anyway, my first owner then was a little girl called Victoria, who used to live on the farm. And Victoria saw me looking into the pool, and I don't know if somehow she knew I was sad, but just at that moment she came over, lifted me up, kissed me on the head and told me she loved me. Malcolm didn't respond. His wings remained wrapped around himself, but the tip of his tiny head was visible, and he was listening. Bjornita continued. So the point is, Malcolm, I may not have learned that much in my 149 years on this earth. Yes, that's right, Benny. I said it, 149. But one thing I have learned is, it may take a little time, but the ones who love you will always be able to see through the outer shell. There was a short pause. Malcolm stirred a little. Bjornita looked worried. And then Benny said, sounding panicked, Sorry, do you mean shell as in shell, like my shell? They can see through it to my naked body. No, sighed Bjornita. I know what you mean, said Malcolm suddenly, looking up. Thank you, Bjornita. And by the way, he said, spreading his wings, you're beautiful. You don't look a day over 148. And with that, he flew up into the sky. Chapter 39. EIWKLTSH. One of the really good things about being an animal, Malcolm had discovered, was that there was nothing to learn. All the stuff humans did, drive, cook, read and write, use computers, he had to spend hours and hours studying how to do. The jumping off the farm roof when he had been a cat, or leaping from vine to vine when he was a chimp, the ability was just there. It was part and parcel of animal life. It was the same now that he was a bird with flying. He just opened his wings and took off. It was amazing. He knew instinctively how to float, how to hover, how to swerve into and out of the wind, how to dive and how to soar. It was a sunny day, but with some fluffy clouds, and Malcolm actually flew into one of them. It was like suddenly being in a mist, and then out again, into bright day. Below him, the zoo looked tiny, like something on Google Earth. Malcolm knew he should be looking for his family, but a part of him couldn't resist just having fun, so he swooped low over the land of the lions, seeing them lying asleep on the rocks, and then lower still over Penguin Beach, trying hard not to shout, "Ha ha, I can fly and you can't," and briefly landed on the head of a pygmy hippo before passing over the petting zoo and shouting, "I'm going to find my family," at Zaza, Trotsky, Ludwig, Mabel, Snowflake and the 3 dollies, who seemed to have all been placed in a holding pen while the zoo worked out what to do with them. "Hooray!" they all shouted back, apart from Zaza, who looked a bit not bothered, although she looked like that most of the time, and Mabel, who said, "Hang on, is that Malcolm? Is he a pigeon now then?" But Malcolm didn't hang around to hear all that. He was off again, rising high over the trees, towards the road that circled the zoo. Most birds at this point during the day, perhaps every single other bird in the world, would be looking for bugs in the air or worms wriggling in the ground, or possibly a lovely branch on which to begin building a nest. Malcolm, however, was looking for a 12-year-old blue Vauxhall Zafira. Seeing his family seemed, at least for the moment, to have brought his memory back, his human memory. At least for now, he knew which car his family would be travelling home in. His beady, precise eyes scanned the road from above. No, he thought, that one is far too new. That one is working too well. That one hasn't got enough space at the back to carry 4 or 5 pet cages when we go on holiday. Ah, there it was, chuntering down the road, a bit stop-start because the exhaust was dodgy. Malcolm flew behind the car, easily following it. His mum was driving, and she never went over 30 miles per hour. In fact, he didn't just follow it. He flew around the car, circling it, dipping down now and then to say hello to Libby or Bert or Grandpa in the back. But they didn't seem to notice. As the car wound through the streets, Malcolm also found himself shouting, often to other pigeons standing around in the road. "Oi, get out of the way, quickly! Fly away, fly away!" "Don't be stupid," they would shout back. "You must have done this. We all do it. It's like a game of chicken. Last one out of the road's a... Ah!" they would say, hopping or flying out of the Saphira's way at the last minute. Finally, the car got to number 43 Kendall Road. It parked up outside. Malcolm landed on the wall by the front gate and watched his family get out of the car. "Mum, Dad, Libby, Grandpa, Bert, it's me," he said. "Malcolm." "Hello," said Jackie. Malcolm couldn't believe it. He let out a huge, "Oh, Mum, you've recognised me. Oh, I knew you would." "What a sweet pigeon, Stuart. Have you seen it? It's singing to us." Malcolm let out a small, "Oh, no." "Oh, that is sweet, Jackie," said Stuart. "By the way, who's going to pick up Malcolm later?" "Oh, yes, the school bus is coming back tonight, isn't it? I'll go." "No, I'm here," said Malcolm. "Here." "I really miss him," continued Jackie. "Can't wait until he's home." "Yes, me too," said Stuart. "And me," said Grandpa. "Eiwkltsh," said Libby. "I don't want to eat him," said Bert. Eiwkltsh stands for even I would kind of like to see him. "Well, Bert," said Stuart, turning the key, "that's very nice of you." They all went into the house. Malcolm watched, with mixed feelings. It was so frustrating that they couldn't understand him, but at the same time it was nice to hear them talk about him like this, without knowing he was there. He thought to himself, "Oh, my family really love me. That's amazing, even though they're all such big animal fans and I'm not." But then that thought led on to another one, which was, "But I don't know that I'm not an animal fan anymore. I've really liked some of being an animal, and I've really liked some of the animals I've met. Not so much the chimps, but the pigs and the sheep and the horse and the tortoises and the dog and the... Oh no!" He thought, "Oh no," because creeping towards him along the wall and licking its lips was a cat. But not Zaza, no, Tiki, out of Tiki and Taki. Or was it Taki? Chapter 40. Is this how it ends? "Listen," Malcolm started to say, but it was too late. There was no chance to demonstrate his newfound ability to speak cat. Pigeon cat, of course, but still cat, because Tiki, or Taki, was just too quick for him. He, or she, leapt through the air and grabbed Malcolm, pulling him off the wall and into the front garden. He, or his, claws dug into him. The pain was excruciating. "Ow! Ow!" Malcolm cried, and then he couldn't speak at all, because Tiki or Taki had bitten into his neck. Malcolm could feel the fangs going in, not deep enough to kill, because Tiki Taki, like all cats, was clearly thinking she fancied playing with this bird for a bit longer first, but deep enough to cause even more pain. He flapped his wings, but it made no difference. One of them had already felt useless and broken. "Is this how it ends?" thought Malcolm. "Killed by my own cat, and I still don't even know which one." Chapter 41. This Army. And then, just as he felt his body go completely limp and his mind start to turn black, Malcolm heard a voice. "Step away from the pigeon." "Eh?" said Tiki, or Taki. "You heard me. Step away from the pigeon." Malcolm felt the teeth slowly being removed from his aching neck. His head flopped to the other side. His vision was cloudy, but he could see. Through the mist, standing in front of the gate to 43 Kendall Road, her fur up and her tail raised, and her teeth bared. Zaza. "And if I don't," hissed Tiki or Taki, "who's going to make me?" "Me," said Zaza. "Oh yeah, you and whose army?" As Taki or Tiki said this, another cat, a brown one, the first one was white, came around the corner of the house and joined Tiki or Taki. This must be Taki, or Tiki, thought Malcolm, groaning inside. Zaza blinked, a long, slow blink, and then behind her appeared Snowflake, Ludwig, Mabel, the three dollies, Trotsky, and even Benny and Bjornita. "Me," she said, "and this army." Chapter 42. Tiki. Okay, said the Kendall Road cats, backing away together. Malcolm felt, through the pain, a huge wave of relief. "But why?" one of them said. "Why are you, a cat, trying to save a bird?" "Well," said Zaza, "partly because we've come all this way. And, well, we've had to break out of the zoo to get here," said Trotsky. "And use our sense of smell," said Ludwig. "Well, yours is terribly good. Thank you, Mabel. To track where the pigeon went." "Yes, but mainly because he's Malcolm." The Kendall Road cats stared at Zaza, and then at each other, and then back at Zaza. "What do you mean?" "Yeah, what do you mean?" It's a very long story, said Zaza, which frankly I can't be bothered to explain to you now, but this is your owner, or one of them anyway, the boy, Malcolm, just in pigeon form. I don't believe you, snarled the white cat. Neither do I, super snarled the brown one. Well, I don't think that really matters, said Zaza, coming further towards them, with the other animals behind, because we're taking him now. Well, said the super snarling one, I don't know why you're helping him, even if he is Malcolm. Huh? Said Zaza. Malcolm, the brown cat continued, her eyes narrowing, doesn't even like animals. He doesn't like you. He doesn't like any of you. Malcolm, his head still floppy, tried to speak, tried to explain. That's not true anymore, he wanted to say, but it wouldn't come out. The Orwell farm animals looked deeply shocked and upset. Zaza frowned. Trotsky put his head down. The 3 dollies did some very quiet baaing. Eventually, Ludwig came forward. It was a bit of a squeeze for him through the front gate, bent his enormous head down towards the pigeon and said quietly, Malcolm, is that true, that you don't like animals? With all his remaining strength, Malcolm whispered, No. The farm animals looked relieved, but then the white cat raised its head and said, OK then, Malcolm, if you are Malcolm, you've lived with us for 5 years. If you like animals so much, if you care about your pets like a normal, lovely owner. Yes, gasped Malcolm. Which one of us is Ticky and which one is Tacky? There was a long pause. Every animal in that garden, and there were quite a few of them now, looked at Malcolm. Malcolm looked at the cats, the brown one and the white one. He knew this. He surely knew this. Come on, Malk, said Zaza. Yes, you can do it, Malcolm, said Mabel. We've got faith in you, said a dolly. Faith, we believe in you. Please, Malcolm, said Bionita, don't let us down. Malcolm stared again at the cats. They were wearing collars, but he couldn't see the writing on them, and at some level he didn't want to cheat. Eventually he said, his voice now a total whisper, You, the white one, Tacky. You, the brown one, Ticky. There was another long pause, and then the white one put its front paw up and turned its collar so that the coin of the collar was resting on top of its paw. What does that say? Said the cat. Malcolm could have lied, but he didn't. Ticky, he said. There was one more long pause, and then all the Orwell farm animals slightly turned and left the front garden. Chapter 43. He's Argentinian. The last thing Malcolm saw before he started to lose consciousness, though, wasn't his animal friends leaving sadly and shaking their heads, nor was it Ticky and Tacky having lost interest in the pigeon now that they realised it wasn't a pigeon, going back through the cat flap, nor even his mother stepping out into the garden, not noticing him and starting the car, nor the streetlights softly coming on. He saw all those things, but they weren't the last thing he saw. The last thing he saw, as his tiny damaged head wheeled around back towards his own house, that he used to live in, so safe and sound, was his own bedroom on the first floor. From the ground he could see up to it. He saw a light come on in there, and with his still strong bird vision, he saw, in the corner of his room, a cage that had been put there, on top of a table near the window. Inside, a small furry creature with enormous ears was running around. A memory came back to him, a word he had learned in school. In the time before, the time when he was a boy, nocturnal, which gave him, even in his terrible state, an idea. He fought against the oncoming tide of blackness, the soft rush of sleep, and flapped his damaged wings. With a supreme effort and with a lot of pain, his broken body lifted. Slowly, tremblingly, Malcolm rose towards the window of his bedroom. He hovered there for a second, looking in. He was right inside. Chinny the chinchilla was up, running around the room, the door of his cage having been left open to expand all his pent-up nighttime energy. Malcolm watched Chinny running around his floor, under his bookshelf full of books about computers and football and soldiers and all the other things boys like, because that's who Malcolm Bailey really was, a boy. With the last ounce of strength he had left, Malcolm flapped his wings and threw himself against the glass. It only made a very small bang, but it was enough to make Chinny look over. The chinchilla jumped up immediately and sat looking quizzically on the other side of the window. "Chinny," whispered Malcolm. The voice cracked. "Chinny, can you hear me?" "¿Eh?" said Chinny. "No estoy segura de lo que está diciendo el señor de la paloma." Oh, for crying out loud, thought Malcolm through the pain. Of course, he's Argentinian. But this close to his boyhood self, looking at his own posters and toys, he found that the memory was there, of bits and pieces of Spanish that he had learned at school. Chinny, listen. Soy Malcolm. Señor Malcolm. El niño. Que vive aquí? If that means the boy who lives here, yes. I mean, sí. Not another Malcolm. Porque eres una paloma? It doesn't matter why I'm a pigeon. I just am. But look, firstly, I'm sorry. Lo siento. ¿Por qué? Said Chinny. For not being nice to you when Mum and Dad gave me you as a birthday present. For not accepting you. I don't know how to say any of that in Spanish. I hope you understand. Chinny looked at him and then slowly nodded. And secondly, I'm going to go to sleep now. Malcolm's exhausted mind struggled for the word. Dormir. But you have to stay there while I go to sleep. Don't go away. No, vea. Can you do that for me, please? Malcolm's tiny, watchful pigeon eyes finally shut. But just before he actually lost consciousness, he remembered one last bit of the chinchilla's language. Por favor, he whispered. And that is where we will leave part 5 of Animalcolm by David Baddiel. I'll be back soon with a final part of this fantastic story and lots more stories and videos coming your way very soon. If you'd like to subscribe or hit a like, that's always appreciated. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.